is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The UN says famine in Ethiopia, Tigray, is now affecting more than 400,000 people. Libya's transitional prime minister Hamid Dbeibeh heads to Cairo for state visit. And protests due in Burkina Faso over insecurity in the country. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi, and for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. OPEC Plus leaders set to thrash out detail of crude production deal. And in sports, Haleta Academy produces national under-17 star Younes Negusier as free training program starts to bear fruits. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. Let's start with the UN, where the organization says more than 400,000 people in Ethiopia's Tigray were now in famine, and that there was a risk of more clashes in the region despite a unilateral ceasefire by the federal government. The UNSC held its first public meeting since fighting broke out in November between government forces backed by troops from neighboring Eritrea and TPLF fighters with Tigray's former ruling party. Now, Girum Chala joins us live on the phone from Addis Ababa. Girum, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us here on Africa Live. Girum, the UN is once again sounding the alarm on the humanitarian situation in Tigray. What's the food security situation like over there?
Well, Richard, as you understand, and you've said it earlier, the Ethiopian government already pronounced a ceasefire from its own side, but unfortunately the TPLF side is still not acknowledging that, and we've been hearing also the UN is also sounding the alarm that the humanitarian situation in Tigray is getting worse by the day because, as you know, access is important for aid delivery. Bridges were broken, one blames the other, and also the insecurity is also being heard from different places. Although there is no significant fighting going on, we are hearing small fightings happening in the regional states. So this is really alarming. The Ethiopian government, we've been trying to ask some officials, is saying that it is trying to work with aid organizations, with the United Nations, food for those people who are looking for it. And I don't know how much it's going to work because peace should come first, and access to humanitarian services, unrestricted access is important. That's what the UN is asking. And both parties, the government and TPLF, are promising, but delivery is still a problem. And we must wait and see. But the suffering of the people is obviously what is really the reality at the moment.
All right, Girum Chala, thank you for keeping a close eye on that story. Much appreciated. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's government says that its peacekeeping mission in Abyei can only be withdrawn if all stakeholders consent. Abyei is a disputed border between South Sudan and Sudan. The announcement is in response to an earlier request by Sudan to replace Ethiopian soldiers in the area. This came amid deteriorating relations between Sudan and Ethiopia over their own border in a contested overstrip known as Al-Fashaga. Sudan recently took control of the fertile borderland, ignoring an amicable land use arrangement by the two nations. Thousands of Ethiopian farmers were evicted, prompting an escalation of tensions. Ethiopian officials have stressed that the removal of its forces from Abyei should be a well thought out and coordinated process.
If the need arises for the departure of the Ethiopian peacekeeping forces, it is supposed to be an honorable departure. And everybody should give a due regard and credit for Ethiopia's contribution. And stakeholders also should be involved.
And Libya's transitional prime minister Abdul Hamid Dbeibeh arrives in Cairo today for his first state visit to Egypt. The visit comes the day after talks were sponsored by the UN and which were aimed at paving the way for elections later in the year, failed to find common ground. It had been expected that the talks in Geneva would establish the constitutional roadmap for the presidential and parliamentary elections by July the 1st. Formation of a transitional government and the polls set for December are part of the ceasefire agreement that saw the end of the second civil war that had divided the North African nation between the East and the West. Egypt was one of the key players in the conflict and later the peace talks. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has been keeping tabs on the situation in Libya, and he now joins me live from Cairo. Yasser Hakim, welcome to the program. Can you give us an update on this visit by Libya's transitional Prime Minister, Abdul Hamid Dbeibeh?
Yes, he's not arrived yet. We expect him to meet with the Egyptian president and top officials later in the day, as the Egyptian president right now, as we speak, is inaugurating a new military base in the northwest of Egypt, close to the Mediterranean, on the Mediterranean. It's a Navy base. And the meeting with the Libyan official, the Prime Minister, transitional Prime Minister, should be at the end of the day to discuss several issues after the end of the talks in Geneva with the UN and the other Libyan parties.
Well, Yasser, you spoke of several issues. Could you unpack what exactly they will be discussing in Cairo?
All right, first of all, the main issue is how the peace process is going on, what is expected in the next few steps, and why have the meetings in Geneva failed to reach a solution, although they have been ongoing for more than 5 or 6 days. The two of the main issues that have led to a standstill in the talks, in the peace talks in Geneva, were first of all the elections, parliamentary, presidential elections vis-a-vis the constitution. So should the constitution take part after the elections or before the elections? So there should be a referendum on the constitution, and talks are, and the deliberations are on the timing and the steps to be taken. Should we go with the elections, presidential and parliamentary elections, and then go for a referendum on the constitution, or the constitution first, and based on the constitution then we go to the next steps, which is to organize parliamentary and presidential elections? This is one of the issues there. Another issue is obviously the security part, which is retained to the military militias and the freedom fighters or rebels or whatever you can call them, depends on which side of the coin you're in Libya. Some people call them militias, others call them freedom fighters. We've got terrorist groups like ISIL. How to disarm all these groups and how to merge them into the political sphere and into the army instead of working independently as militias controlling parts of the country away from the law of the country. So how to merge these militias into a unified Libyan army. This is another issue, because many of these militias refuse to do so, and they are backed by politicians who also refuse because they feel that they would lose power within the political sphere if they are disarmed or their militias are merged into the army. So, and those are two of the main sticking points in the talks in Geneva. And obviously one big issue is mistrust between the political foes when they're sitting down, and this is something the UN official said after the talks in Geneva, that he feels that they are not in trust with each other. There's no trust, and this has reflected on the way the talks have been ongoing and the results that have come out of it, which have not been up to expectations. Another issue to be discussed with the Egyptian president, obviously, is the security situation between Egypt and Libya, and security cooperation and sort of the border protection, and how Egypt and Libya and Libyan forces on both sides can each try to fortify the borders of the two countries and to ensure there is no terrorists infiltrating on the borders, no illegal migrants, and no military groups trying to infiltrate on the vast borders. It's a desert area that is not easy to protect along the borders of the both nations. And this is also another issue that will be discussed with the Egyptian president and the Libyan transitional prime minister. Back to you.
All right, Yasser Hakim, thank you so much for your insight and analysis. Thanks for breaking it all down for us. I also want to bring Samuel Ramani into the discussion, an international relations expert and tutor at the University of Oxford. He joins us via Zoom. Thank you so much for your time, Samuel Ramani. Well, are you surprised the talks have failed? Let me begin by asking you that question.
Well, I'm not that surprised that the talks have failed. If you look back at the February 1st talks in Geneva, which were the first Geneva format talks, which helped create the government of national unity, there were already widespread criticism saying that this is just an intra-elite meeting that doesn't represent Libyan public opinion. And given the fact that the main political figures and prime movers in the current talks are members of the old Government of National Accord, Tripoli based in Tripoli, and the Libyan National Army and HOR respectively, old cleavages have reinforced themselves. So I'm not surprised that this took on a negative tone.
So from your perspective, what is the likelihood that elections will be held in December?
So I think that there's a tremendous amount of international pressure on all Libyan factions as well as external players to ensure that the elections are held on schedule. Jan Kubis, who's the UN Special Envoy for Libya, basically said that these negotiations, we won't leave the room until a deal is signed. Obviously, that didn't happen. I see that kind of resolve continuing, even though there's widespread skepticism in Libya about the UN process. Moreover, every single external player has admitted that they would like to have the elections proceed according to plan, though there are some doubts about Russia and Turkey's long-term intentions.
All right, Samuel Ramani, I guess the question that really needs to be asked is, why has it been so difficult to solve the Libya situation?
Well, the Libyan maelstrom is really a product of many different factors. First of all, it was a product of a whole variety of external powers competing for influence, and now that competition is extending towards the reconstruction process. So even former military allies like the UAE, Egypt, Russia, and France will now be finding themselves no longer united around their support for Haftar, but now competing for reconstruction contracts against Turkey. Secondly, there is a great deal of deep cleavages within the Libyan political system, and the involvement of polarizing candidates in the election process, like potentially Khalifa Haftar, as well as Fadi Bashaga and Khaled al-Mishri on the western Libyan side, is making those cleavages worse. And moreover, the continued presence of foreign forces, up to 20,000 mercenaries, Turks, Syrians, Russians, which combined with the ongoing dispute between Haftar and Dbeibeh, which was evidenced by Dbeiba's failure to visit Benghazi, is causing a lot of instability. So I think the foreign forces, foreign competition for reconstruction, as well as deep political cleavages that have developed since 2014, this is a really difficult and intractable problem.
All right, Samuel Ramani, let's leave it there for now. Your perspective is much appreciated. All right, in other news, days after South Africa's Constitutional Court convicted Jacob Zuma, the former president, has now asked the country's top court to annul his 15-month jail sentence. In his application, Zuma says the sentence is excessive, unjust, and might kill him if he catches COVID-19 in prison. The sentence was pronounced against him on Tuesday for failing to appear at the corruption inquiry led by the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo in February. Although he was given 5 days to appear before police, it was unclear whether he will do so willingly. His supporters have gathered in his hometown of Nkandla to resist his arrest. Femi Adesina, Nigeria's presidential spokesperson, has commended the achievements attached to the Communist Party of China led by General Secretary Xi Jinping. He made the comments as the official celebrations of the 100th anniversary of the CPC commenced. Adesina says as Nigeria pursues its own poverty reduction goals, it has a lot to learn from China that announced that it has attained its goal of building a moderately prosperous society.
A political party is for it to make an impact on the country and on the lives of the people. The Communist Party has made tremendous impact on Chinese life, come from nowhere to become like the second largest economy in the world within just a few decades is a great achievement. It is something I want to applaud, and I believe that going forward, that party will still do greater things. If China can do it, taking hundreds of millions out of poverty within specified time, we also can do it in Nigeria. So Nigeria will continue to study the Chinese model and learn from it, so that whatever we can adopt to also change the country, change our economy, change the lives of people, we'll be glad to adopt.
Meanwhile, reactions have also been pouring in from Zambia on the 100th anniversary of founding Communist Party of China. Chinese President Xi Jinping gave a keynote speech at Tiananmen Square in Beijing, which was closely followed by Zambians.
100 years, it isn't a mean achievement. Mark my words. 100 years of a political party called CPC, governing a nation called China, isn't a small achievement. And yes, indeed, for this political party, for this government to achieve what it does, it is because it has focused on the human beings, or humanity, or people of China, to be specific. Focusing in what ways? Lifting them out of poverty, lifting them out of ignorance, education, name it, entrepreneurship. That is what this political party has achieved for the people of China.
We as an organization are cognizant of the myriad achievements your country has had under the CPC, such as the economic reform and the anti-corruption campaign drive, which has put your country on the world map. It is also admirable that your country under the CPC has achieved the miracle of eradicating extreme poverty.
You're watching Africa Live. We will see you on the other side of the break with more news. Here's a look at what's ahead. COVID infections are said to have declined in Kampala.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The World Health Organization Africa region has warned that new and faster spreading COVID-19 variants are fueling Africa's surging third wave. The World Health Body says cases in Africa have increased for 6 weeks running, rising by 25%. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports.
With case numbers doubling in Africa, focus is fast turning to the new spreading variants. The Delta variant is reportedly spreading to a growing number of countries. The variant has so far been reported in 16 African countries, including 9 with surging cases.
With the rampant spread of more contagious variants, the threat to Africa rises to a whole new level. Among the 14 African countries now in resurgence, 12 have detected variants of concern, including 9 with the Delta variant. WHO was supporting countries to track variants in coordination with a network of reference laboratories.
In Uganda, the Delta variant has been detected in 97% of samples sequenced and 79% in the DRC. 66% of all severe illness in people younger than 45 years in Uganda is being attributed to the Delta variant.
Some evidence also suggests that the Delta variant is linked to people experiencing longer or more severe illness. This is consistent with devastating news being reported in countries of scores of patients dying due to a lack of oxygen supplies.
With rising case numbers and hospitalizations, the World Health Organization estimates that oxygen demand in Africa could rise above 50%. The World Health Organization has made a call for everyone to act now and boost preventive measures to stop an emergency becoming a tragedy. Daniel Arab Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
In Uganda, authorities have announced that the number of COVID-19 cases has declined in the capital, Kampala. This has been recorded in the last 3 weeks and has been attributed to strict adherence to standard operating procedures. The health ministry in the country is expected to give a more detailed update on the latest. This comes amid reports of shortages in oxygen and overwhelmed health facilities. Patients are said to be struggling with inflated hospital bills, which has left many unable to afford health care. Let's cross to Kampala, where CGTN's Leon Sinyenge is standing by. Leon, as ever, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Leon, COVID infections are said to have declined in Kampala, but Uganda continues to struggle with oxygen shortage. Can you tell us more?
Well, it's true. The COVID cases within the capital, Kampala, are said to be reducing. Now, that's according to the Ministry of Health. Statistics around those particular reductions are yet to be availed, but of course it's a move in the positive direction, given the fact that it takes the effect from a 42-day lockdown that was announced last month. It's important to note that the capital, Kampala itself, accounted for actually 50% of the total registered cases in Uganda alone since the outbreak last year in March. Currently, Uganda has registered over 82,000 cases. Now, you can only imagine that 50% of those are from within the capital. Now, like you said earlier, it comes out of the strict observance of the guidelines, but also the lockdown. The lockdown forced the closure of businesses and several centers within the capital and kept several people in their homes. This in itself is a mitigation measure, and there's been positives around that. With now just 15 days into the lockdown, the lockdown will end at the end of this month, July, so there could be probably further reductions. Now, with the positive on that side, there's still challenges on another, which is the desperate need for oxygen. The Ministry of Health has admitted that there's a need to scale up access to medical oxygen. Now, while great strides have been made by the ministry in trying to establish oxygen plants in the national and regional facilities, there's still inadequacies in several areas, especially for patients that are in the high density and intensive care units. What we've been told by the ministry is that patients require 4 to 6 cylinders a day, as opposed to 1 to 2 cylinders for non-COVID-19 patients. Now, that in itself is pretty much 2 or 3-fold on what a patient needs. The access to oxygen still is being dealt with. Now, several oxygen manufacturing companies have come through to help and provide oxygen free of charge. However, not enough cylinders are available to create surplus or even still the immediate need for the oxygen that is medical oxygen that is needed by the patients. The ministry says that it plans to acquire or even purchase cylinders, which seems very much the most needed item.
Leon Sinyenge, thank you so much for keeping us up to date with the very latest from Kampala. Much appreciated. Let's turn our attention to Zimbabwe, where the country has opened its second open prison, this time for women in Marondera, which is about 80 kilometers from Harare. Under this program, inmates are allowed to go home and learn new skills as part of the rehabilitation process. Mariah Wakatuya has more.
At first glance, these women look like they are in a hostel, going about their gardening, rearing chickens, and doing each other's hair. But this is a prison. Marondera Women's Open Prison took in its first 29 inmates in June and is giving them a new perspective on incarceration.
I'm as good as at home. At the closed prison, we would sleep at 4. But here, we sleep at 9 p.m. We cook on our own. We have so many projects that we do. And we are not told what to do, but we also bring in new ideas and suggestions as to what we want to do.
It's a welcome change for nursing mothers too.
At the closed prison, we had to leave our babies at the nursery every morning, but here we get to breastfeed them as much as we want and spend most of time with them.
The open prison system is designed to enable inmates to reintegrate into society as easily as possible. To facilitate that, inmates here will be allowed to go home and visit their families and be in the community for 5 days every month. That time is important to maintain relations.
Our male counterparts, when you are in prison, they don't follow their ladies. But when they know you'll be one day coming on off and you will phone them, your wife will be coming, they will be prepared, and that means the broken relationships. And for the family, the kids, even if there is no father, but the mother, when she is warm, the home is homely.
Prisoners who've served a third of their sentences with a record of good behavior are eligible to come here, where they can start to prepare for life after release.
The closed prison setup was designed to punish. Now, this setup is more on the rehabilitative side. You can tell that this is rehabilitation. I made my mistakes. I'm being corrected. And it's going to help me to get back into the society. And at least I need a starting point. So this is where I'm getting my starting point with the project that we are doing.
Inmates get a percentage of profits realized from their various projects. Fare Mwakutuya, CGTN, Marondera, Zimbabwe.
African countries have over time committed themselves to reducing poverty rates, including the island state of Mauritius. Since the passing of the Social Integration and Empowerment Act in 2016, the government continues to identify families living in absolute poverty and provide the necessary assistance. Here is CGTN's Lou Feifei with more on the progress of this initiative.
Meet the Big A family. They were among the first to receive comprehensive assistance in 2017.
And first we got my mom and my dad, then me, my husband, my 3 children, then my brother and his wife, then my 3 little brother and my uncle. Before, we lived in an iron sheet house. It was small. We have to go to toilet outside. It was cold. Now the government helped us to build this concrete house. It's more comfortable, more room, and even the living room is enough big for us.
The government also provided pastry making training to Yolita's mother, and now the 2 ladies successfully operate a small pastry business.
An assessment is done by qualified officers based on the income and living environment of the family. And if the family is qualified, then he is being registered on the social register of Mauritius. And once the family is registered, so our ministry do provide all support in a holistic way, so that at the end of the day, the family can be out of poverty.
And here are the 3 daughters of the Munian family. A few years ago, the family went through hard times due to health issues and unemployment. The girls faced an uncertain future.
When my husband lost his job, I was sick and I needed to have cardiac treatment. I didn't have money for my children to go to school.
Of course, our goal is to see to it that those families come out of poverty. For them to come out of poverty, We do provide a lot of support, not only financial support, but we focus also on education, training, and employment. If there is any health issues, we do address all these issues so that at a certain point in time, the family is well empowered and can come out of their present situation.
Since getting onto the social register, the family has received needed medical help. The eldest daughter is getting trained to be a hairdresser, while the second daughter is training to be a nursery school teacher. The youngest is now a full-time student, making good use of the tablet computer and other educational materials provided by the government.
Before I was in trouble. Now we are better. My children are going to school. My husband is working. We are happier than before.
Since the passing of the Social Integration and Empowerment Act of 2016 and the subsequent formation of the Social Register, Mauritius has seen the number of absolute poverty cases gone from 10,000 to just about 5,000 families. And while absolute poverty still exists in this island paradise, the government is working case by case to create a truly inclusive society where no one is left behind. Liu Feifei, CGTN, Rose Hill, Mauritius.
All right, our business segment is up next. Don't go away. Here's what's ahead. OPEC leader 2 set to thrash out details of crude production deal. And Africa housing ministers seek ways to develop affordable housing on the continent.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Let's kick off with oil matters, and OPEC Plus are set to reconvene on Friday to decide their next phase of their production policy. The Middle East dominated producer group met on Thursday via video conference to add about 2 million barrels per day of oil to the market between August and December. The deal, however, was thrown into disarray after the United Arab Emirates blocked the move at the last minute. Oil prices moved on the news, rising slightly Thursday before losing momentum Friday. Brent crude futures traded at $75.45 a barrel, down 0.5% for the session, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate futures stood at $74.89, around 0.4% lower. OPEC Plus agreed to implement massive crude production cuts in 2020 when the coronavirus pandemic coincided with a historic fuel demand shock. Analysts now expect oil demand to gather pace in the second half of the year. Meanwhile, fuel prices in Ghana have gone up. The increases are mainly linked to changes on global markets, but could also feed through to inflation in other sectors of Ghana's economy, as CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rofai now reports.
Filling up in Ghana has become an expensive activity. Motorists are feeling the pinch after the latest rise in the cost of petrol and diesel, which has already gone up several times this year.
I run on Uber. I'm a public service person, and the fuel is really affecting us. We are not getting anything out of what we do.
We drivers, we are suffering.
I had to increase the cost of hiring my truck due to the increment in fuel prices.
but people are complaining it's expensive and don't want to hire the truck.
A litre of petrol is now selling at $1.07, up from 81 cents in January. Analysts attribute the hike to depreciation of the local currency, the cedi, against the US dollar, the fluctuation in global fuel prices, and taxes introduced by the government. The increase in fuel prices is already trickling down to other sectors of the economy. In this market, the cost of groceries has also shot up. Analysts say the higher cost of fuel could slow down the country's economic recovery.
It's going to be difficult. Once we see some of these prices going up, businesses can get to even fold up because then maybe their cost of doing business also goes up. And in that case, then you have the negative rippling effect affecting the household, salary slashed, or maybe people laid off at the end of the day. So I think these are the negative change that happens when we see fuel price going up.
Energy experts say the cost of fuel could continue to go up if the government doesn't step in.
In the immediate circumstance, today, tomorrow, go and reduce the taxes. Because world market prices cannot be going up. And you are also collecting everything from us at the same time. That's a double slap. Once you are able to reduce the taxes, then you can come and look at the short to medium. Get the refinery to work.
For now, though, the government is not considering a reduction in taxes on petroleum products, so the road ahead for consumers could remain a costly one. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
South Sudan's government is calling on more investors to put their money in the country's oil sector. South Sudan recently launched its first oil licensing auction, offering 5 blocks. As CGTN's Patrick Oyet explores, the landlocked East African nation is seeking to get its staple oil sector back on track after years of insecurity following its split from South Sudan in 2011.
The Ministry of Petroleum says the oil licensing round aims to attract interest from a diverse group of investors. The ministry says it has identified new exploration blocks with potential petroleum. It says it has compiled crucial data to provide to interested investors.
The government of South Sudan continue to put in place the relevant framework, policies, guidelines, and management system that create conducive environment for all business owners as it embarked on a journey to build the nation.
South Sudan's petroleum ministry says about 90% of the country's oil and gas reserves remain unexplored. Some South Sudanese companies are expressing interest in investing in the petroleum sector.
We are working on this licensing rounds project, and if we get an opportunity, we'll show the government as well as the citizen of the country how this thing is done. Because if we do it correctly, then you'll see the benefit of the resources.
One challenge that many local companies in South Sudan face is lack of financial facilities such as loans. However, that might soon change.
We believe that ensuring a strong financial services sector and the oil and gas sector is key to supporting local content, economic growth, and Stanbic Bank South Sudan is invested in various products to provide new solutions to local businesses like never seen before.
The oil sector is being blamed for pollution in the country. Some civil society groups in South Sudan are expressing their concern over the issue.
Whatever they do as local content should also look into environmental protection issues, because there's been a lot of environmental damages in the oil sector. There's been a lot of environmental damages within the energy sector. And that needs to be taken on board.
The Petroleum Ministry says it will carry out an environmental audit and has pledged to protect the environment. The current blocks available for exploration range between 4,000 and 25,000 square kilometers. The oil companies operating in South Sudan include China National Petroleum Corporation, India's Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, Nigeria's Oranto, and Malaysia's Petronas. But South Sudan's government says there are still more opportunities in the oil sector for other investors from other countries. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
African housing ministers have designed a 40-year plan of action to invest in affordable housing initiatives on the continent. The resolution was made at the end of the Shelter Afrique General Assembly in the city of Yaoundé in Cameroon. Those at the 4-day meeting agreed to enhance mechanisms for the mass production of decent and affordable housing on the continent. They also agreed to set up mechanisms to make it easier to provide cheaper, long-term sources of funding. Most African countries are struggling to deal with the housing crisis. The housing supply deficit in Nigeria is estimated at 17 million units. Africa's largest oil producer has just over 535,000 mortgage accounts, and that's less than a third of the total in South Africa, which has a population a third the size of Nigeria's. Healthcare-focused technology companies are springing up across sub-Saharan Africa after the coronavirus pandemic highlighted gaps in the continent's medical supplies chain. More than 60 new and existing private firms are now distributing health products to consumers and hospitals via technology across the continent. From Kampala, CGTN's Leon Siyange now explores how medical call centers and social media platforms are helping patients in Uganda.
Letitia Iguma has been under lockdown. She spends most of her time at home. That's left her worrying about how she'd access a doctor if she needed a checkup.
Right now, there's so much that's going on, and more we are getting away from physical contact. And so, apart from the cases where we really need to get to a doctor physically, I think for these other cases, we should be able to embrace this new technology.
That's where telemedicine is increasingly stepping in.
Hello, this is Dr. Pamela from Rocket Health.
The service helps patients contact medical personnel who can immediately diagnose and recommend treatment through telephone calls or messages on internet platforms and apps.
Telemedicine is a different module of healthcare delivery. So for it bases on the fact that patients can get healthcare services remotely. So that means that they don't need to be in the same place as the doctors.
This private health service has seen a huge increase in clients over the past year. That's partly been because of the growth of medical insurance schemes in the country.
The doctors here receive hundreds of calls every day. The interaction with patients has mostly been on COVID-19 related issues. Moving away from the face-to-face consultations, the doctors say is keeping them and their patients safe.
Telemedicine is a major shift in Uganda's healthcare service. According to the World Health Organization statistics, there is one doctor for every 25,000 patients in Uganda. It's a gap the technology could potentially reduce. And it could also lead to cheaper access to health services for patients.
Routinely, people would get medical consultations at physical clinic at prices above 25,000 or $6 to $10. What we've done is through our teleconsultations, people can get consultations with a doctor for as low as $3 and sometimes even cheaper. And this is from the comfort of your home. So more people have been able to access a doctor, which they would not be able to do previously.
But roadblocks exist for online-based services. Uganda recently imposed the 12% tax on internet data, making access more costly.
It means that fewer people may be able to benefit from technology-enabled or internet-enabled healthcare services, which is a shame. Also, there's the challenge of internet connectivity. That is improving over time. However, there are still also regions and parts of countries where you do not have a stable broadband or other internet connectivity, which allows for things like telemedicine.
But as more people get online in Uganda, combined with the restrictions due to the pandemic, telemedicine is likely to play an important role in the country's future healthcare provisions. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Don't go away, plenty more to come on Africa Live. Here's what's ahead. New pair of African painted dogs recently brought into Uganda.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for sticking with us. I'm Richard Nta. In Uganda, a conservation project is hoping to bring back one of Africa's native species from the brink of extinction. A pair of African painted dogs was recently brought into the country. The wild canines were last seen in the country's parks almost a decade ago. Leon Sinyenge reports.
The 11-month-old African painted dogs arrived in June from South Africa. They are already comfortable in their new home at the CTC Conservation Center in central Uganda.
They have adapted very well and very quickly, and everything is going well so far. They're eating well and they're socializing with other animals around and getting to the environment, so they're really okay.
The canine species has not been seen in Uganda for close to a decade now. Experts say their endangered status has been caused by human conflict.
They were known to be very good hunters, and in so doing, of course, play a very fundamental role and ecological balance of the ecosystems. But largely, most of the decimation of the wildlife in Uganda can largely be attributed to human-wildlife conflict.
According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, African painted dogs are among the most endangered animals in Africa. Currently, somewhere between 3,000 and 5,500 individuals live in the wild. The largest populations are in Tanzania and northern Mozambique. These are the only known African painted dogs in Uganda. By offering them a safe haven, conservationists believe they can regain a foothold here. A breeding program is being planned for the pair. Thomas Price, the head of the Conservation Center, says that without such interventions, populations of these species may never naturally recover.
We do wish for them to breed so that we can increase their population here and then see if we can work together with UA and find suitable areas or suitable national parks where they can be reintroduced.
African painted dogs usually give birth to a litter of 2 to 20 pups. And while it will take some time to restore the numbers, these 2 dogs could be the start of a much bigger pack in the future. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Butambala, Central Uganda.
Time now for our sports segment. Don't go away. Here's a peek at the headlines. Haleta Academy produces national under-17 star Jonas Negusie as free training program starts to bear fruit.
How would you create your legend?